Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the Can-Am Origin. Now I know what you're thinking, you don't want to watch this video because it's an electric bike and you don't like electric bikes, and that's fine. What I'm hoping to do is give you a different review of this bike, and the reason I can do that is because obviously you know, having this channel, I'm a motorcycle enthusiast like everybody else that's reviewed this, but in a previous life I was known as an EV expert. And I'm going to talk to you a lot about some of this bike and why some of it's good, some of it's bad, and a lot of technical differences that probably most motorcycle reviewers aren't aware of. So we're going to talk about what this is. Does it have a range issue? It does. We're going to talk about that closer to the end because that's going to be something that keeps it from the mainstream buying it. But there is a market for this. It's a small market, but we're going to talk about why it's good, and obviously we're going to address why it's bad and some of the things that they can do to improve this, because we know that Can-Am is committed to doing electric something, and if they're going to continue to do electric bikes, I think I can help them with some of the electric stuff, and we all know if they increase the range, that will also help as well. So of course, this bike is lent to me from Extreme Torque Motorsports. They are awesome. They give me all kinds of time. So this is a riding impressions review. I'm going to do riding reviews, which are more in-depth, but riding impressions are a little bit more of me talking about it, showing you some B-roll like you're going to see right now. I went on-road and off-road, and I actually had this bike. Usually riding impressions, I have it for half a day. I've had this bike for several days now. So I've done multiple charge cycles. I've done a lot of things with it, and I have a better idea of what it's all about. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully this review is different than all the other reviews that you've seen on the Can-Am Origin, and I think we should just get going with the review. So quickly, to put this bike in a class, it's kind of adventure bike-like in its character. It's heavier than a typical dual sport, but of course with that range number, it's definitely in the dual sport category more than the adventure bike category. So if you're comparing this to an adventure bike just based on price and style, it doesn't have the range to compete, and we can talk about charging speeds, we'll do that all later, but this is a dual sport. Now I will say, this is the easiest bike to ride off-road that I've ever ridden. I'm not a hugely skilled off-road rider. I know Big Rock Moto has this bike right now. Ian at Big Rock Moto on the YouTube channel Big Rock Moto has this bike right now. I'm sure he'll be coming out with a far more in-depth off-road review because that's what he's an expert at. But I'm going to give you a little different perspective than his, and I know he's going to go super in-depth as well. So hopefully you can find all the information you need between those two and several other channels out there that review this. But this is a dual sport. I will say that this seat feels dual sporty, but initial thoughts on this seat, I thought it was going to be uncomfortable. Turns out I was actually fully comfortable on this. Now that could be because I didn't go on extremely long rides, and we'll talk about, well, we all know why we didn't do that. All right, let's start with the front wheel, work our way back, and talk about some interesting things about this bike. So starting with the front wheel, I want to talk about the pieces as it relates to riding. So of course you've got a 21-inch front and an 18-inch rear wheel. That means you've got all the off-road tire sizes you could possibly want. It's committed to being off-road. You got the spoked wheels. It's very good. It's got KYB suspension, which I find to be very good. Maybe not the absolute best, but certainly in the upper end of what I would expect for my riding, which again is on-road, exploring kind of riding through rougher roads, and gentle off-road. I'm not a highly experienced off-road rider, but I did find the suspension to be very good. And again, 10 inches of travel, so it's got all kinds of suspension travel, which is what you want. Now it has a single disc out here, out front, which is sort of class typical. I would say that it's certainly more than enough because you have regenerative braking and rear brake on this bike. We'll talk about regenerative braking, what that is, how it works, because it is a little unique, and it's just unique on this bike. So all the braking you need. I did not emergency brake on this bike yet. It's still relatively new. It's got about 1,000 kilometers now that I'm done with it. Done with it for this time. I can have it back again in the future. But yeah, brakes feel fine, brakes feel strong. And again, the tires for me are better equipped than some dual sporty, off-roady, adventure-y type bikes. I found them to be fine for my use and certainly confidence inspiring, but again, not a heavy-duty off-roader. All right, let's talk powertrain now. So this bike is similar to other electric bikes and different. What you have here in this section here behind the yellow area is a battery. So that's pretty typical. That puts the weight where you want it. The difference with this one is the motor is part of the swing arm. You got a single-sided swing arm here, and what that does is for a whole bunch of reasons, it doesn't change the geometry when you give it the throttle, that kind of thing. So it's got an anti-squat kind of built in, and it is extremely easy to modulate the throttle because it's electric, because it has no clutch and no gears, and because this is down here. Like I said, this is the easiest to drive electric bike out there with a tiny little motor. Now I thought, you know, placing a motor on the swing arm gives you more unsprung weight in some ways, but I think because of the location of it down here, it's not at the end of the swing arm, it's down here sort of at the pivot point. It doesn't seem to be a huge issue. This suspension seems to react perfectly fine. Now, when I talk about regenerative braking, this of course spins the wheel, right? It spins through here. We'll talk about this side in a second here, but this spins the wheel. Regenerative braking basically reverses the wires on there, essentially, reverses that and causes this to have some braking power. We'll talk about how that works in a second, but it is something I like. It is something I wish they would tweak. And again, this is my EV knowledge coming through, so we'll explain that in a second, but that's how this works. Batteries out here. This is supposed to be a fast charging battery. They claim something like 0 to 80 in 50 minutes or 10 to 80 in 50 minutes, which is probably accurate, but we're going to talk about that as well because there's difficulties with EV motorcycles fast charging. And again, this comes from my experience with EVs, and I think I can put some context in that for you if you're hoping for better. So, battery, motor, single-sided swing arm. There's one more piece right here is the chain. I do want to talk about that because that's amazing. It's a really smart Can-Am thing. So taking a look at the chain side of this bike, and yes, that is a chain in this housing. This is from their snowmobile technology, and what it is a chain in there completely sealed off. I think it's serviced every 15,000 kilometers or something like that to kind of oil it and check it out and that kind of thing. What this does is gives you sort of the benefits of a chain in that you don't have a massive loss of power through a shaft drive, but it also gives you the benefits of a shaft drive where there's no maintenance, no debris that can get caught in there, no dirt. So if you're driving the rain, the mud, the dirt, all that kind of stuff, none of that is getting your chain dirty, which is amazing on a dual sport type bike, but it's also completely quiet. I've driven a Sur-Ron electric dirt bike and it has the chain guide kind of run across, it makes some noise, but this thing's completely quiet on the trails and on the road anytime you drive it. And that is a really, really unique experience, which again, I'll talk about in 1 second. All right, so this is throttle side. I want to talk about this for just a brief second. This scuff mark, not me, didn't do it, didn't drop it. Somebody may have. All right, so the way the throttle works is just like a motorcycle throttle, right? You spin it on, you've got the normal amount of range that you would have on a throttle. Now this one also has, I'm gonna grab it here and twist it forward. Watch how much it moves forward. Just that much. So see my knuckles? Just that much. That is how you can activate regenerative braking, including a couple other features, but regenerative braking. So what that means is when you roll that forward, it's going to brake the rear wheel. Now in an electric car, simply letting off the throttle allows you to have in general, something like a Tesla, letting off the throttle activates a certain level of regenerative braking. Different car manufacturers do things different ways, and this does things a little different ways as well. Here's what I like. If you do this, your rear wheel brakes. You can set it to a minimum or a maximum. So it's kind of like a switch. It's on or off, on or off. There is a tiny bit of modulation in here that I'm able to just tweak a little tiny bit to kind of get it to be softer. If you have it in the max regeneration, it is very aggressive. It's hard to use in traffic because it brakes the bike quite quickly. When the bike has enough deceleration, the rear brake light does come on, but it's not always on just because you're regenerative braking. If you just let go of the throttle and you're going down a hill, it will also have a very gentle level of regenerative braking. Now, if you set it to minimum, that works well in the street, kind of like a one-pedal drive on an electric car, which means you don't have to use the brakes very much at all. What I like about the maximum setting is off-road, I can activate a skid or at least a tight braking or firm braking off the rear wheel just by doing this. What that means is this also contributes to it being one of the easiest bikes to ride off-road because you can give it some throttle, and then if you want to just tap the brakes and move that rear end around, you can do it purely through regenerative braking. You're not having to go for the front brake lever or the rear brake lever, which means your feet, which don't have to shift on the left-hand side and may not have to brake on the right-hand side, can stay put, and you've got full control with gas and rear brake just by doing that. It is a fun way to control the bike and it works really well, but it needs an improvement. So we'll talk about the improvements I want to see on this bike in just 1 second. I want to talk about seating and standing position on this bike for a quick second. I'm going to try to keep it on the side stand here and not fall over. Hopefully on my driveway it's also tilted. You can stand on this bike quite comfortably. Again, I'm not on the perfect angle just because my driveway does have a tilt here, but you can stand on this quite comfortably and have some control. Obviously sitting on this bike is very good as well. I can basically flat foot or almost flat foot. I'm on the rubber mat here where I have the kickstand on a bike of this type, on this bike. So with 10 inches of suspension travel, the narrow seat area, and the relatively light feel, it's over 400 pounds, just a hair over 400 pounds. It's not like all the weight's down low because it's sort of consistent weight up here. It's pretty good. It certainly feels fairly comfortable on the trail for an adventure bike. Dual sport riders are going to find this thing heavy, and that's fine. But again, the overall control of this, I think, is going to give you a good feel. And with the low seat height, I'm able, as a newer off-road rider, to comfortably put my foot down anytime I want, which means because my brain knows it can, I tend to keep them up on the pegs, and I will say the pegs are a little bit extra thickness, you know, not the length, but the thickness, they're a little extra wide there, and that does give me a really confident feel. So like I said, you don't have to always use the foot brake because you can use this on the trail to regenerative brake, and that's all good. So let's talk about a few improvements that I think they should make from a technical standpoint, and then we're going to talk about some of the things that I find on this bike that are going to be problematic for the mainstream rider. All right, so first let's talk about improvements. I love this regenerative braking here. It works very well because what that does is it puts power back into the battery. And if you're going down hills or consistently going down hills, you can see it either hold its range or even improve its range on big hills, especially on the road. So it's a feature that I think is important, but I also love the control aspect of being able to control it through the throttle. What I do think they need to improve is this is kind of part sharing with their Spider models. You have to roll those a little bit forward to turn the bike on. You do the same thing with this to turn the bike on when you're doing the starting setup. And I think they need to get a different throttle for this bike because I would like to have more gradual control. The only way to go from minimum regenerative braking to maximum is by setting it in the touchscreen display, which you can also control through your thumb hands or thumb controls here. So what I'd like to see is you be able to have some variability, just like you have variability in the throttle, have some variability in the braking through regenerative braking, because that to me would allow you to take more use of that regenerative braking. I'm finding like sometimes it's just too aggressive or not enough or that kind of thing when you have just essentially that switch of minimum or maximum. So if you have that kind of switch type feel, you end up using your regular brakes. And on this bike, anytime you can put power back into the bike, that's what you want to do. So I'd like to see some variability there. Now we have to talk about charge times. We're going to show you charging this in a second. It's a very simple piece right in here. It has the J1772 charger, which you plug into here. That is a typical home fast charger. It's also available in some cities for free for a what they call level 2 charging. That would be a fast charger for a motorcycle. You're never going to get level 3 in today's technology in a motorcycle because that's too much power for too small of a battery. It just can't, there's no benefit to it. We'll talk about that in a second. But I have a fast charger here, so I plugged it in. They say that 0 to 50 minutes. I was seeing an hour and 45 charge time from about 5% to 100%. Now remember, the very top of that battery goes very slowly. So we got to talk about charge time. I like to talk about charging batteries in electric cars or electric vehicles in this way. Picture it like pouring water into a cup. You can pour really fast to start, but then you have to slow down when you're near the top, right? And that's why everybody quotes that 0 to 50 or 0 to 80% or that kind of thing, that percentage in there, because that charges fast. And then the last little bit, you have to slow down. So think about pouring water in a cup, pour fast, near the top you have to slow down, at the very top you slow down a lot. So that last 1% on a bike like this, on cars, always takes a long time. Elon Musk likes to describe it as moving cars from one parking lot to another parking lot, which is probably more technically correct. As you move cars, they can all find a spot right away, but at the end, they all have to search for a spot, and that takes longer, and that's why you slow down at the top end of charging. So if you think about those two analogies, let's go back to my analogy with the cup. This is not a huge battery like a car. This is a fairly small battery, so it's like pouring into a very small cup. You have to slow down fairly quickly, which is why you can't do that ultra fast charging, because it can never speed up fast enough. It would just not work on a battery like this. And that's where some of the problem comes in. I have had in the past a Tesla. My wife currently drives, and we have for a number of years a Kia Soul EV, which is not available in the States. It is available here in Canada, but we've had that car for a long time. I've driven a Wrangler 4xe that I've owned for a number of years in the past. So the Wrangler 4xe is the great example. It's got about 40-ish kilometers of pure electric range. And when you plug into a level 2 charger, which is the same plug as this with the same charger I have here, in approximately 2 hours, just over 2 hours, it gives a 6,000 pound vehicle about 40-ish kilometers, 35, let's just call it 35 kilometers of range, 32, 35 kilometers of range. I've had it a little bit more than that, but let's call it 30-ish kilometers of range on a 6,000 pound vehicle in 2 hours. This thing takes 1 hour and 45 to charge by my testing, and it gives it 100 kilometers of range, just over. We'll talk about why I got 100 and not more. And that took 1 hour and 45 minutes. And again, that's because it's a small cup. It's got to start and stay slow. Now, why am I only getting 100 kilometers of range when the website says it's got significantly more than that? Well, this is a dealer bike, and part of the fun with this thing is it has exceptional acceleration. That's the fun on this, that people get on. I want to see how fast it accelerates. Now, it tops out, in my case, at 127 kilometers an hour, allegedly, because there's no speed limits around here that I can do that. It was private property, I'm sure. Anyways, that's where it tops out. But unlike lightweight bikes that have small engines that top out of that speed, this one goes basically very quick acceleration past 100 kilometers an hour right up to that 125, 6, 7 kilometers an hour before it slows down in those last few kilometers an hour. So it's not underpowered in any way until you reach that limit where it's electronically limited. So speed-wise, that's what you've got. Charging speed-wise, small cup, has to be slower charging. So while this is faster charging than some electric options out there, it's really only that 0 to 50 that's faster because it has to fill up quite slowly in that last little bit because it's a small cup being filled quite quickly. So those are things that I'd like to see. Now, let's talk about the real problem with this bike. This is no secret to Can-Am. It's no secret to their dealers. It's no secret to anybody who's seen a review on this bike. The range on this bike is an issue for some people, especially being an off-road bike. So I took this off-road, and you'll see on the picture right now, I basically ran out of electricity on the trails for you. If you look at that display, you can see the 2 dashes in the display on the right side of the display. That's indicating my range. That should show kilometers, but it stopped. If you look a little further to the left and down on the bottom display, you'll see a single red line. That's warning me, hey, when you get to the last 2 lines of battery, they turn red and says, hey, it's very low. Now on some electric vehicles, they will drastically cut power when you get down below to the very little bit. I didn't see a significant cut in power. I didn't notice any cut in power. To be fair, I wasn't driving exceptionally fast. I was on the trails and then I came home. I live close enough to the trails that I can go from 2 dashes on the dash to home safely. So I did not get stranded on the trails, and I was able to get to the trails, which kind of makes me the ideal buyer for this bike. But I don't think I'll buy it. So let's talk about who the ideal buyer is, because it's fair to say every motorcycle has a small group of people that will buy it. For instance, I like that people love Harley Davidsons. I'm not into that style of bike. It's not really my thing, but I can review it and I can appreciate it. And I think if you're a Harley Davidson rider who's not into this, you should still appreciate that this bike exists and that there's a group of people that should buy it. This bike, for me, I should be the ideal buyer because I'm an early adopter of EVs. I understand them, I'm willing to take risks on them, and I've spent more money than the competitive vehicles that are non-EVs would have. You know, some electric cars, my electric Kia Soul costs a lot more than a regular Kia Soul, but we bought it and we're happy with it and it's been perfect for us. So I'm an early adopter of EVs. I've got home charging with the plug right in here, so that's not a problem. I work from home, so I could charge it anywhere from work and that kind of thing. It has enough range to drive in the small city of Fredericton to do everything I would want to do. It gets exceptional range in the city. It really does outperform its mileage when you're in the city. It doesn't do great on the highway, but again, I don't need that. So I should be the ideal buyer for this. Again, I can get to off-road trails very quickly, get off them very quickly, but I still find that this needs more range than I need. So the problem we have with this bike is the market is very, very narrow. Why should you buy it? This thing is exceptional off-road. If you want to learn off-road, it makes off-road riding really, really easy. If you go from your home to your workplace and you've got level 2 charging there, range isn't going to be an issue. You can charge here, you can charge at work, you can do your thing. If you drive a lot in town, the Pulse is another version of this bike. It's not the off-road version, it's the on-road version. That's going to be an incredible commuter bike if you can charge at home and charge at work and that kind of thing. It's capable of highway speeds. Kawasaki's Ninja e-bikes or electric motorcycles are not capable of highway speeds and have far less range. So those bikes are kind of completely unusable. This bike is usable, It has Apple CarPlay in there, so if you need to, with your headset and that kind of thing, keep in touch with people, you can do that. You can use the CarPlay apps to give you access to charging. There's lots of charging apps that can give you access and help direct you to charging, so you can find charging in various places. In those urban environments, this bike is going to be great. In my environment, where I have enough urban and trails nearby, this bike is great. But for me, I still want a little bit more range. So the problem I have is I feel a little bad for the dealers that have these bikes, because there are always narrow markets for things. Snowmobiles are narrow markets. Certain types of snowmobiles are even more narrow markets. Extremely fast sport bikes are very expensive and very narrow market. This thing is very similar. It's relatively expensive compared to what you can get in a gas vehicle that does competitive things, and it does not have enough range. So Can-Am, I want to love this, and I do love everything about this. It is by far the best electric motorcycle that I have driven. It's easy to ride, it's got great technology, it's got all the things I want. It just needs a little bit more range. So that is my take on the Can-Am Origin first riding impressions. I love the way it rides. It's not something that a lot of people are going to want to have because there's no clutch, and I will tell you that if you are a gas person, you're going to enjoy the new automatic bikes that are out there more than this. But if you can accept that this thing's simple to drive, very zippy and quick through town, I think there are people that would absolutely enjoy this. But you have to take into account that you cannot go massive distances on this bike. I'm seeing around 100 kilometers with my driving based on, again, it's calculating based on how previous people have driven it and how I've driven it. I did drive it hard on the highways. I did drive it some acceleration runs, that kind of thing, and I'm sure many other people did as well. And I was seeing very, very high double digits in kilometers in range. So 99, 97, that kind of thing. It is not getting the range that I would like to see out of it, or the range that they advertise, simply because of the way we drove it. Driving it in town, I think it could exceed that range, and I think if I had it again, I could exceed that range on that. That's who this bike is for. If you have questions about this bike technically, if you have questions about how it fits in, if you're an EV enthusiast wanting to get an electric motorcycle, let me know in the comments below. I realize that this is a longer video. I realize that the people watching this video is going to be limited in number. But if you're interested in it, I'm interested in this bike. I'm interested to see where Can-Am takes it. I just find it a little hard to recommend this bike, as sad as that is for me. I wanted this bike to be awesome, and it's just really that range number that's gonna hold it back and make it a very, very small market that buys this. If that small market is you, I think you're gonna have a blast riding this. So there you go, there's my riding impression of the Can-Am Origin. I will have this back. We'll talk about other things. I'm gonna talk about cost of charging in a future video. We're gonna talk about some of the other technical things with an EV that are kind of quirky on an EV motorcycle. So if there's things you wanna know about it, let me know. We'll put that in the next video. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you soon.